Hey, how's it going? Welcome to what is a live stream and what will be a video once I was going to say dies. That's probably not the right way to put it. Once it stops being live, I have a plan here. Let me pull up the chat here because we get. Sorry about that. You're hearing me talking through the computer. That's a huge L to take early on in the stream. So for those of you that are still here in the future, I don't know that anyone's really here yet now, we're going to watch a debate, a sort of what in chess would be called a simul, but in debate form. So this involves one person debating with 20 or something people. And it's a good way to learn about people and what they think and why they do things and say things. Saying things is a form of doing things. So we'll be watching people battle their wits. And specifically, I'm going to take a very positive approach here. I'm going to certainly try to. I'm not here to make anyone feel bad necessarily. And anyone in this debate who might not have performed in a way they feel good about now, that's okay. Life is about learning and growing, and that's what we're here to do together here on the What's Therapy Corp channel homepage on YouTube. Thank you for coming to this thing. So the thing is, okay, so I'm doing this for for attention, obviously, but the thing is, I'm also very passionate about debate. Like I care about debate a lot. I find it very useful and important. And not just debate, but like reasoning even more generally. I think it's like, I think we almost don't if you try to think like what in 100 years will humans look back on, about today, and not like obvious stuff like, wow, they really let the people in power lead them astray from issues like climate change and wealth disparity and stuff. But like the more complex stuff, like what are like the frame shifts that we can't fully imagine now, but people in the future will be like, wow, they still, they still thought that, like when we talk about like, I don't know, completely different ways of seeing the world. One thing I think we'll kind of realize is reason is probably even more important than we've already realized it is, in my opinion. I sort of think it is what makes us human, potentially. Not that we're necessarily better than other creatures just because we're human and have reason, though. That's actually a topic that comes up in the video tangentially. Because I've watched this. I've watched this like twice already. I mean, I listened to it, / watched it. I enjoy seeing someone debate, and Sam Seder is he's a good person for this because he is very good at communicating. He's very articulate, that's why you see people overcompensating and commenting on how often he says, because they do not have a lot of other things to comment on. He did a great job in this debate. He's very patient. But I'll let I don't want to weigh it down too much here. You can come to your own conclusions here. But my point is about reason and all this, and in the future, you could just fast forward if you don't want this intro. But then it's like, why don't you just watch the video? You know what I mean? Like, why are you watching me if you just want to watch the video? But I do that too, so I get it. But in the future, I think we'll realize like reason is there's more of a, like everyone has access to reason, pretty much, if you can think. And I think there's a lot to be said for we're underutilizing reason. And I've been wanting to learn more about arguments and how arguments work. Some of the technical stuff like premises, validity, conclusions, and how they fit together. But also just informally, I want to be able to, when I'm talking to someone about something serious, like we're debating with a friend or family member about something going on in the world, to be able to say, I think we just twisted the argument accidentally there. But anyway, so the first thing I wanted to highlight about this, there's like an intro. Let me just play the intro and then we can move on.
Like, what's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general?
To
Like,
be xenophobic nationalism is better.
We should have a coherent culture.
So already realized he's repeating what she says. It's important to clarify what the claims are that are being made, and I'll say more about that in a second.
It should be a part of the same culture.
Which, do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
I mean, look, I got to be honest with you. Like, you and I have a fundamental disagreement. We will
You got the royalty-free music in the background, so that's just sort of aesthetically.
never see eye to eye on this. Hi, I'm Sam Seder, host of The Majority Report. And today, I am surrounded by 20 conservatives.
Okay, so that's the introduction. Now you're ready. Maybe you're watching my channel right now and you don't even know about Jubilee. You don't even know about the videos they do. You don't even know Sam Seder and the Majority Report. That's probably possible. More likely you're watching and you're like, I not only know about Jubilee and the Majority Report, I've already watched this video you're about to comment on. So that might be, we might have the whole sort of gamut here in terms of what exists. But in terms of the, what you're thinking. But that's okay, whatever, I think it's still going to be worthwhile because I wanted to, even though I've already watched this and I was like, do I really need to live stream it? I actually think that if I'm thinking about it, like, we all interact with family members and other people where we have differences of opinion. And I think and differences of belief and differences of perception and differences of sensibilities and perspectives. And I think there's a lot to be said for like, figuring out what those differences are. And that's what communication is all about. We figure out what the differences are. It does not mean we're going to necessarily resolve all our problems, but it will help us figure out which problems are resolvable versus which are not. Another thing I was thinking with debate, sort of similar, is debate helps you realize who is ignorant or ill-informed. And I don't mean ignorant in a pejorative way, except that it's not great to be ill-informed, but there's quiet ignorance where you just are like, oh, I don't know about that. You know what I mean? Versus loud ignorance, which we may or may not see some of today. But there's a debate helps you clarify the ignorance versus the dishonesty or the lying. So you get to see how people respond to pushback, and that helps you clarify, are they being ignorant or are they being dishonest? I'm going to have an adult beverage. You don't have to, obviously. I'm just going to do that. Hello, chat. Thank you so much for I call you collectively chat, but I'm referring to all of you individually as well, I guess. I don't know. Not really, but I'm doing okay. I am standing. You may notice I totally don't know what's going on. I think I have a pinched nerve or something. I've talked about this before. I called it lumbar radiculopathy, which it is also sort of, but I don't really know exactly what I'm dealing with, but I have numbness in one of my feet. I've dealt with it for months now. I think I'm getting a handle on it, but I'm also totally not, and it's really annoying. So if you've ever dealt with a chronic medical issue, it's literally what's going on. It's not that bad. It's not numbness. I'm sorry. It's not pain. It's numbness. But it's annoying. It's what the hell, what is going on? So I think it's people have sciatica, or I don't know if it's that, or I don't want to have to, get more healthcare, but I do have to I probably will ultimately maybe have to get some tests, but I'm mostly okay now. I'm just doing tons of physical therapy and standing and not sitting too much, but it's I don't want to overdo it. So anyways, I'm fine. We're obviously getting through life, working, seeing friends, making art, and that's what it's all about, sort of. I hope you're all doing well. But I really do. As much as I'm doing this just because I sort of like doing stuff online, I like hearing myself talk, I like, having attention, potentially make a small amount of money, doing this, or remind people my channel exists. I really also can rationalize it that I think we're all going through crazy times right now. And here we get to see someone who is a professional communicator of the progressive variety communicate. And I think it's helpful because it can actually help clarify your views. That's certainly why I watch the Majority Report, which I'll admit, because I don't want to pretend that I'm unbiased here. I watch the Majority Report. I find it super helpful in clarifying my reality of what's going on. And we all have different sources of that. You can go to wherever, but I think watching people debate is really helpful because that's something we face in our day-to-day life. So yeah, mostly, I hope you can get out of this maybe, and whether it's from me or Sam or something you just think of when you're watching. I guess I should call him Seder. I don't know I don't know him familiarly, but I hope you get something out of this in terms of how to, conduct yourself effectively. Maybe you don't do exactly what Sam does. Maybe it just makes you think of something you want to do better at in your communicating. I mean, just think about it, y'all. Like, we do have like amazing abilities to communicate if we really try to use our best judgment and like try to get our points across. So I just wanted to kind of highlight what I think someone is doing quite a good job with this, and we can all maybe think about how we could communicate better or what we want to do better in that regard, because a lot of the things in life could be boiled down to communication to some degree. So let's get going, and I guess I'm gonna watch it at regular speed. I know I should speed it up, and maybe I will, but it's like it just feels wrong to do that. I just hate speeding up the videos. So unless they're music, and then you can kind of remix it in that way. So okay, so let's check out this debate. Let's kind of and here's the other thing. We can kind of, I was gonna do like a sort of like tier list thing, but I obviously didn't want to go through the trouble of making 20 images to load into a tier list. And I don't want to do a tier list, but I want to rate the interlocutors, which, you shouldn't use pretentious words like that when you're trying to communicate. It makes you come off badly. But yeah, we're gonna rate them by sort of their performance, and not, we can rate Sam too. They're all open to it. But I want to, let me know what you want to rate them on. But I want to think about. Wait, I had this written down here. Fallacies, first of all, like how many fallacies they have, kind of get a read on their fallacy situation. Yeah, nope, that's not where I wrote it down. So what are their fallacies? Oh, they're sticking to the topic. So okay, wait, I should frame this. So okay, rating each one. So off topic, how are they? Let me say 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Off topic, ignorant, bigoted, fallacies. So how off topic are they? 1 being they're not off topic at all. They're super on topic. How ignorant are they? 1 being not ignorant at all. 10 being like they don't know how anything works. Bigoted, 1 is like super not bigoted. They believe everyone deserves rights and they're super cool with like people just flourishing as long as they're not hurting anyone. 10 being they want to impose their will on people and like make people feel bad just for existing. Fallacies, 1 being we don't know any fallacies they have. 10 being they're super fallacious. They're swimming in fallacies. So I will come back to those if you forget what they are, because I'm not going to forget what those 4 were, but you might. You know what I mean? So that's projection. That's not a fallacy technically. Okay, let's get going. This is long enough. What was that introduction? How long was that? Okay, it's not immediately visible. Let's get going. Let's hear what it has to say. So, okay. So, by the way, I'm recording this right now on March 10th, 2025. The video we're watching was posted yesterday on Sunday, March 9th, and was filmed late January. I don't know whether it was before or after the inauguration. I don't think it makes a huge difference. My guess is it was after. I feel like someone said January late 20s, but I don't know where I heard that. And the inauguration was like the 20th. Oh, so it must have been. Right. The inauguration was the 20th. So it was definitely after the inauguration. Okay, but a few days after doesn't make a huge difference, but it is significant that it was a month and a half ago, and you'll maybe see that we should be asking ourselves, I guess, like, you should always be asking yourself when you're having a conversation, like, you want to believe what someone's saying and believe that they really think it. And you also want to understand it as a, potentially what could be a snapshot in their beliefs. Just like when we express ourselves, it's to some extent a snapshot. It could be what we always think, because snapshots, I don't know, we could have the same snapshot, but it could also be something that changes. So I guess you could be watching thinking, was that just an attempt to cover their stated views, but now maybe they shifted. I don't know. I like speculating. I should stop front loading this. Let's just get into it.
My first claim is Trump's attack on DEI hides his real goal, which is to give corporations more power.
So already, sorry for the bad freeze. I love the fact of defining the claim, and that is extremely important. And so I'm stopping already to say, when we're having debates with people, that is probably the simplest way we go wrong. We don't have a clue on what the defined claim is. You can shift conversations. You don't have to be stuck in the mud about what the claim is, but it should be clear in your mind when you're shifting from one claim to another, and whether you're shifting to a claim that is in reference to the claim you were trying to talk about, or necessary to like a premise of that conclusion. So you would need to consider whether that premise is true, or whether it's a non sequitur, and so on. So let's just get into it. Oh yeah, so to debate Sam the conservative. Okay, you can read it. I don't need to tell you.
Sorry, Sam.
No worries.
All right.
Wait, what just happened with the Jubilee title? To debate Sam's claim, the conservatives must enter the circle. Okay, it's just funny that they broke this up into two titles. Like that's not enough. Like you could either leave it there or just like say the second part in this bubble. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about Jubilee, by the way. Don't even subscribe to them or anything. But like, I don't know. I think this kind of shows why, but we'll talk about it for complicated reasons. But this is the best video they've ever made by far.
All right. Sorry,
Like,
Sam.
why does the title come like after he's already sitting down? Like, okay, that's not the basis of my criticisms of Jubilee.
All right. I think I have a slight issue with the back end of the premise. I guess Trump's attacks on DEI being a real goal to, give corporations more power. I'd rather center the conversation around.
Okay, so it's strange to call it a premise, but okay, we're obviously giving the benefit of the doubt for people being nervous. Also, he acts like he's kind of focusing on a different thing here, but he's really not.
The Democratic, especially as conservatives, the issues that people have with DEI and why I believe Trump would, want to support the issues that, people are voting for him for.
I mean,
Okay, so that's not I guess it's good that he frames it in that way, because it's not a non sequitur, but it's worth pointing out. He's saying, I don't want to just focus on what you say DEI is a stand-in for and is hiding, but I also want to emphasize why DEI is viewed as important. It's just that is sort of just a response to the claim, because obviously you're saying it's not a stand-in if you say it has real value.
talking about his whole
Right.
attack on DEI.
I mean,
it's actually
if you're saying taking down DEI has real value is what I mean, obviously.
DEIA, right? You know that.
Right.
In government agencies. The A being for accessibility.
Right. Yeah, and I think the attack on DEI isn't an attack
But
on...
I do think they let Sam choose his claims here. I think they let the people who come on choose what their claims are, which would only make sense. I watched one recently with Michael Knowles came on as the exact same program, and he's this like extremely reactionary, very ignorant and bigoted gentleman from the Daily Wire establishment. And he did a really bad job debate-wise, and I watched it and analyzed it for the YouTube members and the Patreon people, and it was really funny and interesting, but so now I wanted to watch like a positive sort of manifestation of it. But his claims were really, I thought they were very loaded. I guess you could look at anyone's claims and see them as loaded. I guess it sort of just depends, but like you could see Sam's claim and be like, well, you're assuming that Trump wants to give corporations more power. And like, that's a fair response in terms of like, that gets the conversation going. With regard to a claim, people can pick off whatever pieces of it they want to talk about. And then you do ultimately want to get back to the original claim. But this person is doing that fairly well. Like where they're taking on the question of it being a hidden agenda and saying, no, it's, valuable to target diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
people's protections.
Which is going
It's
on a
the
lot. By the
other-
way,
on the other
if you don't know what's going on, there's a lot of stuff going on in the U.S. I can't really catch you up on everything if you haven't been following the news.
end of the spectrum, right? Wanting to end DEI doesn't want to end protections for someone being disabled, someone being, inaccessible to get into a job. It rather wants to de-incentivize corporations to push them to hire these people on unfair bases, right?
Okay, but DEIA.
Right.
Okay, so we're working out a definition right now. And definitions are pretty important, and you kind of do have to work them out before you really have an argument, obviously. You can't have an argument where you're using totally incompatible terms. So you have to work out what you're defining. So they're, unfortunately, spoiler alert, they don't over the course of many minutes, like Sam and multiple other people do not really come to an understanding of what DEI is, like over the full 20 minutes of the question. Like, watch this. Like, they do not come to an agreement on what DEI literally means, let alone whether it hides Trump's real goal, which I guess sort of is indicative of where we're at historically, and also just maybe shows like the effectiveness of the Republican attacks on these sort of like protections, because it involves sort of redefining the entire concept that they're attacking, like literally saying like anti-discrimination stuff is discrimination. And it's interesting that you often run into those sorts of paradigms in debate. You find someone's like unintentionally maybe like totally misrepresenting their view.
It's not about,
because their terms are just defined differently. Let me know if you've ever felt that way.
quotas or anything like that. It is about protections for people within these organizations, or to make sure that you have different communities that have the opportunity to apply to these things.
Right.
So it can mean within government agencies, it means things
Okay, I'll
like,
speed it up.
let's pay interns.
We'll get used to it.
So that not only wealthy people can have their kids do internships in these agencies.
Right.
Or let's put out notices around different parts of town,
Sure.
metaphorically speaking, so that people know this job exists.
This is where it begins, but this isn't the ultimate goal that conservatives have an issue
I
with.
hate
Conservatives
it.
don't have an issue with trying to spread job applications to poorer communities.
Well,
so
then
everyone
why
gets-
rescind DEIA
the prob-
requirements in government agencies?
Because the problem with DEIA is there may not be like perceived actual number quotas, but that's what it devolves into.
So over the last couple of years, and especially like the last year, DEI is something that people talk about. And so, but people don't necessarily agree on what it is. So then when you see the government, the US government, going really hard against this thing, I guess the question is, do you just, like, how deeply do you look into the actions of the government? Like, if you're, or of any organization, like when there's this new thing that's like an supposed enemy, how deeply do you investigate it before you let your sort of innate tendencies pressure you into taking some sort of stance on that thing?
And especially with corporations.
Do you have
it
the
devolves-
evidence of that?
I mean, sure, we can look at corporations that are government agencies that are hiring people on not true proper bases. We can even look
Well,
at.
I mean,
we can even look at
would you
the
have
DNC's.
any evidence that that's happening?
Yeah, even the DNC's nomination of Kamala as president this year. There was no reason.
So that's very strange. That's very strange, and that sort of is enough to let you think, like, are we in like a really confused definition here? Not sure why Kamala Harris would be mentioned as like, yeah, they get into it, but it's not technically off topic though, because he's like thinks he's talking about DEI.
Reason to nominate Kamala as she wasn't democratically selected. She wasn't. She didn't go through a single primary.
Well,
none
wait
of
a
these
second.
things.
So you're saying that Kamala was the vice president of the United States after
Yes.
the president drops out 2 months before the convention. You think that's a DEI
She wasn't
hire?
Every presidential nominee is democratically selected to be the nominee for that
Do
party,
you realize
except
there were
for
not
Kamala
even
Harris.
primaries prior to 1972
Well,
in
sure,
the
but
Democratic Party?
this isn't before
I'm
1972.
sorry, we need to slow it down to regular speed. It's just the rhythm of conversation. It's just ridiculous.
What did
This
you
is,
think
know-
you were going to run primaries in those 2 months?
Well,
I mean,
sure,
Joe
I mean,
Biden should have dropped
but
out
even-
3 years
even
ago.
before-
So that's important. You have to make sure you do your best to see your opponent's perspective and concede whatever you can to make the conversation as productive as possible. There is no point in, do not intentionally withhold conceding things to your opponent, you know? Grant them that so that you can move on to the actual points of disagreement. The point of any debate, you know, maybe it's to talk about that first claim, but maybe it's also just to find whatever is the most interesting and productive point of disagreement to talk about.
Well, sure, but even before, when Kamala was running in primaries, she wasn't the next man up. None of this. She wasn't the next person.
She
up.
was the vice president,
right? Of course, but she wasn't
that
in
tiny
primaries.
Detail. But
right,
listen,
so Sam's getting a little snarky already, but you know, I mean, you're playing with fire when you get snarky like that because you're sort of like opening the floodgates, but I feel like he can tell that he's talking to a guy who's like potentially like fairly nice and is not just going to use that as a license to be super snarky himself. So, yeah.
aside from, I would have might have wanted a different candidate as well. But that has nothing to do with Trump rescinding orders that basically say you need to search for a wide range of candidates, not necessarily give any different benefits, but you need to make sure different communities have access to the awareness of this job. You need in your office accessibility.
Okay, let me be totally honest. I don't know, like, in detail what DEI legislation. Sorry, hold on. Sorry, the Not Even a Show podcast just started playing on my phone. That happens sometimes. The Patreon app is totally, like, broken. Like, my phone has issues, but it's really the Patreon's fault, Patreon app's fault. But you know, still subscribe to me on Patreon. But yeah, I love Not Even a Show. They're a great YouTube channel, and I listen to their podcast all the time. So the episode just started playing on my phone because Patreon app was like, "Hey, you want to listen?" It's like, "No, actually, my phone's not on." Anyways, okay, so I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I don't really know exactly what DEI legislation has looked like and done. And if you do, and if you honestly do, okay, intellectual honesty is important, but it does require self-awareness, and we're not always overflowing with that all the time. So, you know, but if you understand DEI and the legislation, and you can point to specific evidence that disproves what Sam's saying, then fair enough. But for the sake of argument, for the sake of conversation, you often have to, like, you know, stipulate what the other person's saying or whatever. And so we're going to just stipulate what Sam's saying here is what DEI is, i.e. it's not affirmative action, and it is what he says it is. If you disagree about a point of fact, you have to have that evidence. You can't disagree with someone's point of fact on the basis of your opinion. If you have a strong belief based on some sort of like vague memory, and there's a high probability that, you know, they happen to be wrong, then fair enough, you can air that. But it's dishonest to counter someone's confident statement of fact with your own opinion. If you somehow have another confident fact, we'll see situations like that, and those are quite difficult, actually, where both people believe themselves to be totally factual. But it is important to be honest with yourself about whether you're presenting an opinion or a fact. Anyways,
for people who have physical handicaps.
I didn't explain it. I don't know if Jubilee explained it yet, but they vote the person out when they get to 11 flags. The person's out, and so on. So it's kind of interesting in that way. I sort of feel like it would be like, that's good. You could do part of it that way. And then we really should just hear from everyone who's there. We don't. And it's weird. We hear from like half the people. It's like, what the heck? Also, like, do they have a Patreon where they released a full cut? Why are you sitting on like extra footage? Apparently it's like 3 hours long. Like, just release it. That's like annoying.
If you have folks who identify as as trans, you need to make it at least hospitable and not. This is all non-discriminatory.
Like, you can see what the Republican Trump administration is doing right now. Like, they are literally discriminating against trans people, like, and many other folks. But you can see, like, they're literally just discriminating against trans people. So, like, if there were policies and are policies in place that try to limit discrimination, that's good. And the reason we should also stipulate what Sam's saying about DEI and what it is that no one's actually presenting any like confidently stated opposition that's like based in any sort of evidence or claim of evidence. I mean, there doesn't seem to be. Again, you can pause things and look things up in conversation, and I think that's important when you're having a debate with like a family member or friend. You know, it's not an offense to the other person to look up something, and vice versa. You know, people should be able to look up, you know, what you're saying, and they have a fact checker here, but they sort of pop in when they feel like it.
Discriminatory stuff. That's what this is all about.
But you're cherry picking the portions of DEI that even conservatives don't have issue.
Right. That's why I'm stipulating what Sam says also, because he just grants what Sam is saying is like the good part of DEI, but then suggests with no basis in evidence that there's like all these bad parts.
Conservatives don't have issues with making workplaces.
The whole DEI apparatus within our government was a function of doing exactly what I said, had nothing to do with quotas.
It is unfortunate that those things get taken out, and there might not have been specific numerical quotas.
What else was he trying to take out?
It's trying to take out people getting jobs that don't deserve those jobs. People getting pushed into positions they have no qualification.
There is no evidence of what you just said happening in these government agencies.
That's not true at all. I mean, we're not allowed to sit here and have notes and numbers to pull up for you. You can't
give me one example.
You can't ask me to pull up numbers when I'm not able to sit here and look on a computer for you.
Like, this is not a good excuse. I mean, because you should have like some like it's been, let's say a week when they recorded this. I mean, like, Trump's attacks on DEI. So, I mean, Trump had obviously already. Did they say when it was? No, of course they don't say when it was recorded, because God forbid they put like useful information in the description. But Trump, so they've been attacking DEI for a while. I mean, it's just, you should have some sort of evidentiary basis for what you're saying. I mean, it can be a vague recollection. Oh, I heard there was this thing, and and like we got the Kamala Harris thing that was like, what? So we're just like looking for a real example, buddy.
But these are problems.
Also, I should say, I have a beard, so I'm biased in that way. Obviously, I'm more biased towards Sam's side. That is something I will own, and that's worth just kind of acknowledging. So I would hate to not acknowledge that. Looks like he's getting voted out.
Conservatives.
Sorry, you've been voted out. Please return to your.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay, so what do we think? We are rating each person on how off topic, ignorant, bigoted, and their fallacies and so on. I don't know. I need a better way to frame it. They're all in different they're all different types of words. It doesn't work when I say them like that. Anyways, so how off topic was he? I would say 1 through 10. I'd say he was 2. I mean, he was like almost completely on topic. Didn't address the corporations getting more power thing. But let's say 2 out of 10. Super not off topic. Ignorant. I would say he was very ignorant of what this stuff is, and he made himself look pretty ignorant, and that's okay. Again, I'm not trying to speak negatively about this guy. There are lots of things that I've been ignorant of, and I think it's totally fine to be ignorant sometimes. And he was pretty humble about it, and I imagine this guy is going to look up the things that they were talking about and try to learn from it. So when I say ignorant, I just mean not knowing maybe about the subject in detail. So let's say 7 out of 10. And how bigoted? There was no bigot. Maybe the Kamala Harris thing, but like, it wasn't mostly a bigoted thing. I mean, you could certainly read into that and ask why he was like that. But assuming it's just ignorance, bigotry should have to be like demonstrated, like in a very overt way, I think. I'm not going to jump to assuming something's bigoted when it could be lack of information about a subject. He looks like the head of the rehab circle from Breaking Bad. Yeah, this social worker, except he would need to have like one button unbuttoned. Okay, so let's say 2. 2 for bigoted, not very bigoted. And fallacious, there were definitely some fallacies in there, I'm sure, but I didn't pick up on anything jumping out. So let's just kind of say let's just say 2 for now and move on. Okay. So not very fallacious. I mean, I shouldn't have done fallacious because I have to, know what fallacy it is, I guess, if I say that. Anyways, let's keep
See ya.
Okay, so I think the roots issue with DEI isn't what the previous gentleman was trying to point. Conservatives aren't necessarily have issues with those things like accessibility to people who.
Okay, but that is what the previous person was trying to say also. But again, I understand being nervous or misspeaking or something, but it's just strange to frame it as a disagreement when that is also what the other person was saying.
Might need help. The issue is, and I kind of referred to this before, when you have agencies and systems, what tends to happen when you have government overreach.
Okay, I have no idea what he means by that. When he says, and the guy behind is really smiling. But when he says, I referred to that before, I actually have thought about that earlier today, and I have no idea what he's talking about. At first, I thought maybe they filmed the questions out of order, but it's like they definitely didn't do that. Is it possible they cut out so much between that first guy and him that he was already on again? Like, no. So, like, is he referring to his public platform and he's made these comments on Twitter or something? Like, I don't know. I actually have no idea what he's talking about. But again, it's not a big deal. It's just one thing I thought was very interesting.
What tends to happen when you have government overreach, big government, is that agencies and systems get abused. And I think unequivocally, DEI was heavily abused in practice. It was great in theory. It's idealistic, which...
Sorry, I'm making faces because I just noticed the guy behind is making a lot of faces and I got really confused. But anyways, I'm going to try to focus. I sometimes,
happen when you have government overreach, big government, is that...
And I really think the Republicans are so big government. It's crazy. Like, I don't know if they're more big government than the Democrats in the U.S., but like so much of what... like a president coming to power and doing these executive orders that he's done and trying to, install this group that completely upends the entire functioning of the U.S. government. Like, that seems like big government. Like, if you're shrinking the government in a top-down way, you're still doing something top-down. Anyways, we're focusing on debate here. I'm not trying to talk about politics. There is one thing I just want to briefly mention. It's more about stocks than politics, but just a little update. If you're invested in Tesla, sorry, it did fall 15.4% today and 3% after the close. It's also in the last 6 months now down. So, maybe don't, when you're the world's richest man, maybe don't like be so in people's face about it. You know what I mean? And maybe don't cut things that are good, and maybe just don't involve yourself in government in any obvious way when your businesses already benefit completely from the government and take billions of dollars from the government and have for many years and would not exist without it. And when your companies are also built on thin air, be very careful and do not throw stones when you live in a glass house, because things can happen. Down 41% since January 1st. So I just want you all watching to feel inspired. You know what I mean? We'll come back to this.
Agencies and systems get abused. And I think unequivocally, DEI was...
And yes, I think he did a Nazi salute. In my opinion, it looked like 2 Nazi salutes that were extremely obvious. He also has a history of saying that Jews promote anti-white hatred. He said that extremely explicitly on Twitter. He supported the Alternative for Deutschland party, which a fifth of Germany voted for, and which has extensive links to the Nazis. You can look it up. And I think he did 2 Nazi salutes, in my opinion.
In practice, it was great in theory. It's idealistic, which is sure is fine, that a lot of people can get behind, but it was abused in a lot of ways. When you have...
I would love to have access to their raw footage and recut an episode of this. I would consider that the opportunity of a lifetime. And let me tell you, it would be comedy gold. I would just cut to random people at random times. It's really, those sorts of editorial decisions are fascinating.
Actors, like we're in California right now. When you have actors, white male actors.
So they're talking about DEI, of course. I'm sorry. I'll try to get back to the subject. My streamer brain kind of kicks in.
Who are being told, we do not want white men. We're not gonna cast any white men. We only want this particular kind of gender, race, right? That is an abuse of a system. It's no longer fair, but more about just perpetuating one aspect of, visual compelling aspects. Because at the end of the day, what's gonna happen is companies are gonna say, well, we want to look the most diverse.
Okay, well,
and what that is it's moral grandstanding. It's like because we have more black women, we sell better soda, like that.
I don't know what the soda thing's about. I guess he's just saying, yeah, like companies are, using identity politics or, like there is basically he's responding to the claim by saying there is a real problem. And you should always, again, be charitable with the person you're talking to. And like rephrase what they say in the most charitable way possible before you're responding, make them feel heard. There is, okay, this is a key thing. I'm glad we're getting this. I'm sorry, whatever, it takes a while, but you should set your standards super low and not think about yourself as trying to, set your expectations super low. Your standards high, expectations low. And don't think of yourself as trying to change someone's mind, but try to do the absolute minimum possible that would still make you satisfied. So maybe that's just making someone feel heard and having them listen to, honestly, maybe just making someone feel heard about your difference of opinion. That could be step one. You just hear someone out. And maybe you're not lying, you're not pretending you agree, but maybe you're like, oh, wow. I mean, I don't think about it that way, but it's cool to understand your perspective and stuff. But anyway, Sam's doing a great job hearing out this person and making sure that he makes himself feel heard. I do wonder if he understood he was talking to a guy who was a successful white male actor. But I don't know. I don't know if that would, I feel like he didn't know that because I feel like he wouldn't have just said, oh, it's been hard for white people to get jobs in Hollywood when he's talking to someone who, yeah.
I got you.
That is not.
Well, that's getting a little far afield from what Trump's DEI orders are. But I can tell you, as somebody who was a sitcom actor in the 90s, I would walk into a room and everybody I would see would look like me. And I was doing a second position, which doesn't even see would look like me. And
I feel like that's the face of someone who did not realize he was talking to a guy who was a successful white male actor. I mean, sort of, you could say, well, it's proving his point because Sam was a white male actor back in the day when they didn't discriminate against white male actors. But I think it sort of proves Sam's point because it's really, the problem is like that white men have often been privileged. And so it's not discrimination to stop privileging them.
Doing a second position, which doesn't even exist anymore.
I should say us, but I'm not an actor.
Where you do 2 pilots a year. And I was looking around basically every part of television when I was a kid. I was centered in some fashion. It was either this is about my mother or this is about my father or someone like me was centered. So, we can argue as to whether or not Hollywood is overcorrected in some fashion. But on a governmental level, the DEIA directives that agencies were following for the past 4 years, there's nothing, I don't know what you mean by abuse on it, but there is no evidence that it was an affirmative action program in those instances. It was about anti-discrimination. You cannot discriminate against these people, and you want to open up opportunities for a broad swath of people. Again, the internship is like one of the most material things that exist there, where the idea that you need to pay interns. And that's important because you want low-income people to have the same sort of like opportunities to see these things as wealthy people. My kids can maybe afford to do an internship for the summer instead of going to get a job.
I think what's happening is we're talking about 2 different things.
But I'm talking.
Okay, so Sam did a good thing there where he said, like, we're getting kind of far afield, and then he addressed it anyways, and then he said, like, but that's separate from, that's, pretty separate from what we're here to talk about, which is, and then he, restates the point of, like, this is about not discriminating not discriminating. So, I mean, and it's just like, it's very tempting to just believe him because, like, you know, it makes me think of the whole Bill C-16 in Canada thing, which a certain discredited, maybe still technically psychologist, Jordan B. Peterson, rose to fame from just a normal fedora-wearing professor to a public intellectual superstar with fancy suits, who, you know, literally rose to fame lying about a piece of legislation that was just about adding gender identity to the types of characteristics that people could be considered legally to be discriminating about, you know? And so it's sort of tempting to say, well, this is often what the government has to do, is just to be like, oh, by the way, you also can't discriminate about this, and you also can't discriminate about that. And so I'm tempted to think that that's what DEI is a step in the direction of, you know? So yeah, that's my logic there, I guess.
About Trump's
But let's watch them try to refocus on the issue. I do like this about the Jubilee format, where they kind of get different people's perspectives. You get different people kind of picking up the thread of a conversation. You don't normally get that in a conversation. You know, you're talking to like 3 family members. You don't usually do this type of, you know, usually it's just kind of chaos. So it's kind of nice to have one, you know, dyad, and then someone changes out another person, and so on. Yeah.
Rescission is a way of basically driving people out of these agencies, making it
you're saying Trump specifically, and I understand why you're saying Trump, but I think the American people as a whole have kind of, and I won't say whole because obviously it's not 100%, but a majority of the American people have kind of rejected DEI because, again,
I don't think a majority of Americans know what DEIA is.
That may be the case, but again, my point is we're talking about abuse of a system.
So, okay. So if you're granting that it may be the case that most Americans don't even know what DEIA is, then how would they have an opinion about the system being abused? Also, the system is usually just abused for like nepotism more than like any other sort of identity and innate characteristics, and that's a huge issue. But this guy does seem like a nice guy. I mean, he does seem like a nice guy. He's patient. He's got like a good temperament. And I just think he honestly might not really have been like, it's not like we're born with this knowledge of how like the history of the US government works. Like maybe he doesn't totally understand like what even these laws are. Like who has the time to read this legislation? You know what I mean? But like maybe this is helpful to have it explained, or yeah.
What you're talking about is not necessarily what was happening. What people were seeing were,
hey, they have like a disagreement over like reality, which does happen in debates.
Because you're white, you can't do this, and liberals like to do this thing where they create systems, and then they created the whole idea of woke, and then they backed away, and then conservatives say woke, and then they're like, well, we don't know what woke is. They created DEI. Biden literally said.
So this feels like a talking point.
Kamala Harris is being chosen because she is a black woman, and then all.
And so, just to be fair, I don't remember that. I don't follow everything Biden says, but I will stipulate that what he's saying is totally true. Let's like maybe not the exact interpretation he's taking from it, but let's stipulate that that's true.
All of a sudden, Democrats for the rest after that said that's not why she was.
Still, it feels like a bunch of talking points. The idea that Democrats like to do this and that. I mean, and why would the fact that is he saying like Democrats created DEI and then say that they didn't create DEI? I don't know why that would be important when we can't even agree on a definition of what DEI is.
Was chosen, even though Biden literally said that, and then we have this we have this cognitive dissonance as if we're not living in reality.
Biden wanted to make sure that there was that there was an opportunity for a black woman to be his vice president.
Yes, but why did Democrats move away from that and say no, it wasn't because she was a black woman?
So people are having a great time, which I love to see. I love to see people having a great time. And okay, let's see this play out. But again, we're stipulating what this guy's saying. Sam's agreeing with it. Let's say Biden said, I'm sure. Okay, should we just look it up? It doesn't matter. Given the debate, it actually doesn't matter what he said, quote unquote. So let's just keep watching.
So my point is
it's
that
not because she's a black woman.
but that's what they said. I can agree.
Okay, it actually does matter. Sorry. I guess it really doesn't, like, really to the point and to the main claim, but it's worth just taking 5 seconds and looking up. Pressure grows on Joe Biden to pick a black woman as vice president. Joe Biden calls himself first black woman to serve. Okay, yeah, I mean, he was extremely senile, I think is probably technically fair to say. I don't, what did he say, quote unquote? Okay, he says he is considering 4 black women to be his. Okay, so let's. Do I need the quote? Do I need the exact quote? And I'll pull it up. Hold on. All right, so this is a CNN article. So I love CNN. No, I mostly read Reuters, frankly, but I like to branch out. So I'm not committed, but I've named, and among them are 4 black women. So yeah, I mean, he says that to a black woman. Like, he's just trying to make it clear that he is motivated to choose a black woman. I mean, we could obviously speculate on the constellation of reasons why he did that and felt it would be beneficial to him to do that. But let's just say, okay, he wanted his candidate to be a black woman. Now, is that DEI? Kind of not. It doesn't. I don't know that is, but let's see.
It's not because she's a black woman, but that's what they said. Why did they say that then?
No, because there are plenty of black women, right? Like, he could have picked anybody, but he picked specifically her. You're positing the idea that there wasn't a black woman who would have been qualified for that position.
No,
and I don't believe that.
No, that.
Yeah, and this guy doesn't think he's saying that, but it does sort of follow. Like, the assumption that Kamala Harris was chosen because it was necessary and sufficient that she was a black woman is sort of saying that that there are not black women that would be, like, qualified on merit as well. Because I think what Biden was saying is let's just stipulate. Biden was saying it's necessary for my vice president to be a black woman. And he started on that basis and said it's necessary. Now, I don't necessarily want, like, agencies and organizations to hire on the basis of race like that. But that's not an example of them doing that. Like, that's an example of the president being like, or like the, I mean, I just called him the president because, I mean, I guess he was, he was technically running the country. But yeah, that's an example of just being like, I want to do this for marketing purposes, or like, it's better for my public relations. It's better to, like, yeah, this whole project I've got going to have someone who like meets, other demographics. I don't know that that's even in the same realm as DEI, frankly. Like, the idea that Biden makes a decision, like, yeah, on that basis. So, yeah.
That's not, conservatives aren't saying that there aren't, because, again, even in the Republican Party right now and in Trump's cabinet, there are people of color that Democrats pretend don't exist, like J.D. Vance's wife. And
J.D. Vance's wife is not in the cabinet.
No, but if J.D. Vance was a Democrat, his wife would be lauded all over everything because of her color of her skin.
Okay, so now we're just talking about people getting more media attention because they're, like, black or, like, not white. And it's not related.
And I'm not here to defend the Democrats' choice on every policy, but there is one party in this country that is identitarian. There is one party that is represented and it is homogenous, and it is the Republican Party. 85% of Republicans are white. That's just the reality.
Crazy. That's crazy.
So does that
Some
mean that?
people don't necessarily have a problem with that.
But here's the thing. You said even if let's just say, okay, that's true. 80% of Republicans are white. Does that mean that they're less moral? That they can't run?
No. It definitely doesn't, and that's definitely not the implication of what Sam was saying. And I feel like people should sometimes just slow down so they make sure they don't misunderstand things in a debate. Because Sam was clearly saying that the right wing and the Republicans in the U.S. are identitarian and do identity politics. We just don't notice it because we're used to it, because it's been the history of this country is doing white identity politics, essentially, and giving preference based on the basis of race, but it's white people. So that was sort of the point of that. It's not that 85% of them being white makes them like not know what's going on. It's that it's just normal to them to have white people be a disproportionate representation in a population, sort of. So a comment like this about the morality is just a pretty serious misunderstanding, honestly. And in like a lot of conversations that would be like, what? Why did you just say that? You know what I mean? So when you're talking with like a family member or like a friend, what you definitely don't want to do is you don't want to let a comment like that throw the whole thing off course and make it so now you're having a personal, now you're like feeling, you are offended that they would say, what? How could you think that I'm saying that? Like, what is wrong with you that you make such assumptions about me? You don't want to let it get even more off track and more personal. So it's important to kind of try to keep it on the rails, even if one person starts veering off of the rails. So
they can't run an effective government. What does race have to do? What does race have to do? Hold on. What does
Donald
race?
Trump didn't have to
what
say.
Does race
my
have
vice
to
president's
do?
going to be a
No,
white
no, no,
male.
no. What
because
does,
they
no,
all knew
okay,
it.
it's ridiculous for both people to be talking like this. So at this point, it's like, which one's supposed to back down? It's a little bit contextual and difficult to sum up, but either one is good, but like it's ridiculous to talk over each other like this. I guess the important thing is you don't want it to always be the same person backing down from these sorts of overlaps, we could call them. You want it to be balanced, so there's mutual respect.
No, this is the premise of DI.
Anyways, I cut off Sam's point. He was saying that they didn't even have to say that it was going to be, that Trump didn't even have to say he was going to choose a white man for his vice president because everyone knew he was going to. So that's a fair point. He's saying in the conservative movement, identity politics is just so ingrained in favor of white men that it's not even seen as identity politics.
Race have to do with running an effective government? What does race have to do? If let's say DEI on the micro level.
I will tell you right now.
DEI on the micro.
Yeah, diversity always helps in an organization in general, but also we are just talking about anti-discrimination, not even affirmative action.
But McDonald's.
I'll tell you.
Am I going to get better
question.
nuggets?
I'll ask you a question.
If the cashier is black or white,
I will.
No. No one brought that up. You might notice no one brought that up.
What does that have to do with anything?
I'll tell you what it is. First of all, DEIA means
What does the thing I just brought up have to do with anything? Okay, I'm trying to be nice.
that if you come into this agency or corporation, you're not going to be discriminated against because you don't look like everybody else, or you don't have the same like physical abilities as everybody else, or you may require handles on the bathroom or whatever it is. That's what DEIA does. But does it make a government better if there's a broad representation of the people it's supposed to govern? Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Regardless of DEI, don't we already have things in our Constitution that protects people's rights, protects people?
No.
So that's a great question. That's a great question, and it's good to ask good questions. Do we have anything in our Constitution to protect people that would make this DEI stuff not necessary? Totally fair question. Not sure why he's asking the other people involved. Probably because he doesn't want to admit that his, opponent here might know the answer. I mean, did Sam go to law school or something? Like, I don't know. Whatever. I don't need to look it up. But he looks into this stuff. He goes to tort conferences for fun. Like, he cares about law and has legal professionals that he interviews on his program and stuff. So he actually cares about understanding the technicalities as much as possible of what's going on.
You don't?
But he's not a lawyer. He's a layman, but I mean, he looks into stuff. So it's a fair question. Anyways, it's a great question, and it's good when you're having a debate. Very important, actually, and probably essential a lot of the time, to identify what are the points of evidence that would pertain to a subject, whether you know those points of evidence or not. Like for example, if there were provisions in the Constitution that covered this, that would pertain to the conversation. So even being able to ask those questions is important, even when you can't answer them genuinely. So yeah.
No.
Do we or do we not?
No, we do not. Tell me what protects people from discrimination in housing and in work and hiring or getting loans. It's all statutes. And in these government agencies, there was nothing except for that order. That's why Trump just rescinded it.
I'm gonna tap out because I think someone else has a better can defend that point specifically.
Unfortunately, he was wrong about that, but I respect the humility there to be like, look, I do not know. You're asking me what is there in the Constitution that would make DEI unnecessary, and why do all the protections against discrimination have to be enacted through statutes rather than any of it being in the Constitution? I don't know the answer to that. I respect that he's admitting he does not know the answer to that. So let's give him a rating on our scale right now.
Better than me.
All right, please return to your seat.
And good. It's good to resign. If you're wrong or you don't know the answer, it's better to resign than to make stuff up. Okay, off topic. There was a lot of off topic here. I have to say this was a lot more off topic than the first guy. He was bringing up stuff that was pretty irrelevant from the actors thing. So I'm going to give him like a 7 for off topic. Ignorant, I'll give him a 7 also. That's the same we gave the last guy. I don't think he knew any more or less about the subject of DEI. Bigoted, there was nothing bigoted in there, I don't think. Let's give him a 1. Like the thing about whatever. And fallacies, I shouldn't have done this one because nothing jumped out. So let's give him just a 2 again, same as we gave the last guy. Okay, let's keep going.
Hey,
How are you?
good. How you doing?
Okay, when it comes to DEI, essentially, if a person was not racist, he would hire someone regardless, right? So why would we need a policy to protect a person if we've moved past racism? So would you consider yourself racist?
Wait, are you
Okay.
suggesting we've moved past racism?
Would you consider yourself racist?
Okay, so already huge red flags, huge issues. Okay, so just the not responding to Sam responding to him and instead reasserting what he had asked is kind of not good faith in a conversation. But let's just look at what he sits down and says, because these premises are strange.
Person, if someone regardless. Essentially, if a person was not racist, he would hire someone regardless, right?
Okay, so we have the gendering of the boss as a guy. We have the singularly talking about race when diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility is not just about race. So that's strange, but okay, fine. It's an example of what you're trying to talk about. And then it's just like, where is this going? Okay, so like a boss would hire someone regardless if they weren't racist. But then a premise of his argument is that we've moved past racism, but then he disregards that when confronted on it.
So why would we need a policy to protect a person if we've moved past racism?
So, okay. So that's very clear. I mean, look, it's a bad argument, but it is an argument. It's saying if people have to be racist to discriminate against a hire, and we've moved past racism, then why do we need policies? It is an argument. The problem is, I believe this is called an invalid argument. Well, hold on. Soundness is when the premises are true and the conclusion is true. Validity is when the premises validly lead to the conclusion, but the premises are not necessarily true. Am I getting that right? But here, I think here it's a valid argument that is not sound, right? Because the premises would lead to the conclusion, but one of the premises is not true. Please honestly correct me in the chat if I'm wrong about this, because I am literally trying to learn this stuff. But it's one of the premises is blatantly false, okay? I mean, or at least very questionable. And then so when Sam responds, hey, that premise, really? You know what I mean? Like, really? You think we've moved past racism? This guy doesn't address it. And that's a huge problem. You have to address if one of your premises is called out as not true.
So would you consider yourself racist?
Because a conclusion... And then, okay, this is the other part of it. Like, ending with, so would you consider yourself racist is a bit strange because... But, okay, I guess it makes sense because what you're really trying to end with is... Okay, he's trying to say, if you're not willing to consider yourself racist, then you're admitting that no one else is racist enough to discriminate against hires in a way that would require anti-discrimination laws. So if you're willing to support the existence of anti-discrimination laws, then you must right now consider yourself racist. Little does he know, he's talking to a progressive who knows his shit, you know?
Wait, are you suggesting we've moved past racism?
Would you consider yourself racist?
I consider myself, and sometimes
But that bothers me. That like refusal to answer the questioning of his premise and asking Sam to overextend himself in this way before even addressing that his own premise was faulty feels very dishonest in communication and bad faith.
I think we all practice like some form of, white supremacy. I think actually like we all do to some degree.
And then what I love is he doesn't even try to get more of like a thing here from Sam about that. Like you would think a conservative would be like, what? Like, how are you saying that we're all practicing white supremacy?
Well, I'm glad that you're saying that. So I guess going to the LGBT topic, it's
what? Like, why don't you press on that if you brought it out of him? Like, why not just be like Sam's giving a good response, but he would certainly be in a difficult position, or he'd be in a slightly more challenging position to articulate exactly how he might unintentionally be an agent of white supremacy on some occasions. But he's trying to give a legit answer, which is like, I mean, what he's really saying is like, this is not about my own personal feelings about my own personal bigotry, which is not relevant to this subject. And yeah, it's obviously just this individualized perspective on oppression, which is just ridiculous. Historically, you can look at things. I honestly think, and that's why I talk about ignorance, and I'm not trying to be negative about it. Like, I think a lot of stuff that people say that or do that we don't like can be resolved by like informing themselves, you know, not like JD Vance. He's not going to pick up a book and be like, you know what, Peter Thiel, I don't want tens of millions of dollars, but like, you know, your average person can definitely reflect on things with further knowledge. So I think that's why I like to think of things in terms of ignorance rather than malice, unless there's proven malice or bigotry and so on. But it is just funny to put Sam into like a specific line of thought and then just back off. Well, let's talk about something else.
it seems like it's very prevalent for you as an issue.
Seems like a big issue.
We're just seeing a lot of disorganization here. This guy's coming on totally disorganized, and like, frankly, he doesn't have to be this like active in the company. He could take a little bit less of like, I guess he has to kind of be owning the conversation because you're trying to put the like main guy on the defense, but yeah, it's not really working here.
The Republican Party spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars demonizing trans people.
Well, the reason why they've done something like that, and I think you're misconstruing the narrative, they haven't...
Wait, what was that?
Well, the reason why they've done something like that, and I think you're misconstruing the narrative, they haven't...
Okay. So we don't want to make fun of people for misstating a word, but it does definitely sort of make you wonder, like, what else don't they know if they don't know the word misconstrue and they think it's misconstrued? It just, again, it's not about making them feel bad. It's just like, okay, well, what else might we not know if we're having a conversation?
Demonize them. They simply want protections back for their own children because children are being stripped away from
Who's
their
their
parents.
own children?
Parents?
Children are being stripped away from their parents?
Yes, due to AB 954, they've now included gender identity.
So I'm not going to look that up, but it's just worth saying, because let's just stipulate, again, we're stipulating that what he's saying is totally legit and true and that there's a real law. Again, we don't have to stipulate his interpretation of it. That's a big difference. You stipulate the facts of what they say, but you have to be able to separate fact from interpretation and opinion. And so we're not stipulating the interpretation. And I think it goes back to what I was saying about Bill C-16 is my guess. I'm not even looking it up, but should I? Okay.
As a AB 954, they've now included gender identity as a premise to remove and strip parental rights for children who maybe they are rejecting their gender ideology.
So, but you'd be okay with parents who agree with their children's doctors to provide gender affirming care?
I do not agree with that. Do you?
Okay. So I'm trying to look it up. It's a California law, apparently, 954. I'm just like confused because I just did a quick Control F and there was nothing related to gender. Like it's literally nothing related to gender in the law. So I'm just kind of confused. I'll pull it up right now. Assembly Bill 954 from 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. It's supervision, custody, conduct, maintenance, and support of the child. To facilitate, this is not necessary to go through these details because I can stipulate aspects of what he's saying. But usually it just has to do with like considering gender identity as a factor that can be discriminated against by other people. But this, I'm just I searched gender and it's literally not in there, so I don't, whatever. But again, let's stipulate, I guess, what aspects of what he's saying. But Sam does a very good thing, which is stipulate what he's saying and say, well, you're so important. You really care about parental rights. So you think parents should have the right, if they and their kids think that it's in their kids' best interest to like take, puberty blockers or something. Like you're okay with that, obviously. And especially when their doctor agrees, right? Who would you be to say no to that? And immediately this guy walks back his whole sort of argument by saying that actually the parental rights are not the operative thing here.
I believe that parents and doctors can make those decisions with the kids.
If a
course.
child can't.
Okay. Before we get to the end of this, I'm changing on our rating scale bad faith. I'm changing fallacies to bad faith. Okay? I'm changing it. Fallacies was a bad thing. I'm trying to learn about fallacies, so I was being ambitious about it. Forget fallacies. We're really the fourth thing is going to be whether they're good faith or bad faith, which maybe is not a great idea now that I think about it because it sort of factors in the ignorant and bigoted thing, but we're going to leave it as its separate thing. Because honestly, there's a lot of different definitions of good faith and bad faith, but I think it's important for you to be able to identify good faith argumentation, bad faith argumentation. I'm sure a lot of you do already. I'm not trying to pretend like you don't. I'm just saying you should be able to call that out and in your internally. You don't always have to say it externally, but it modulates how you go about things because it makes you think, okay, they just, twisted what I said in a way that seemed pretty willful. So maybe I'll just kind of expect less, and it's all about finding where that expectation level is. What's the minimum that you can gain from this conversation? You don't want it to be too high, but you don't want it to be too low. So we're trying to find what that minimum is, and the good faith and bad faith factors into that. So we'll come back.
Smoke, drink, or have sex before the age of 18, they should not be able to consent to a sex change. Now, in terms of
okay, it's just ridiculous. Like kids know when they're trans. They just know it. Once in a while do they change their mind? Of course. But they often quite know that they're trans, and they don't need to get they don't need to get surgery almost all the time. Like they can just make that decision after they're 18 and usually just try to block their puberty or get hormones. And it's usually mostly reversible or totally reversible, or it's worth the risk because it helps them live life because it's good for their health and it's healthcare. So, again, you could read books and articles about this as long as we didn't live in a wormhole information world where people just get extremely biased sources and don't have critical thinking and media literacy. People could just research this stuff and you can read about it and get a more balanced perspective.
DEI initiative, in terms of a DEI initiative, the reason why there's military bans on trans women,
I feel like his tone is super condescending, but I feel like it gets worse too.
And trans men, is because they do not have the ability to cooperate at a mental capacity when they're constantly undergoing hormone treatment as well as depression pills.
This is just total speculation based on nothing, and there are tons of people in the military who are trans, and I don't believe there's any evidence of this. And like, what audacity to speculate like this?
As well as
Disgusting, really.
stabilizer pills. And so when you go out to combat, do you really think you're going to bring an ice cooler pack with you?
Right. Great comment. It is a smokescreen because these people will talk about kids, and you're like, okay, so you're okay with adult trans people existing, and they're half the time they're like, no, and it's like, cool. Well, you just wasted my time with a bullshit argument that was not central to your whole perspective. Like, have self-awareness.
Whether that be hormone, estrogen, or whatever it may be, while you're about to shoot someone of the opposing war.
Well, the executive
Of the opposing war, dude? Like, what? Like, were you gonna say opposing gender because you got confused? Like, what are you talking about?
orders that Trump gave
Like,
were
imagine being like our soldiers need to be more focused on shooting the enemy. Like, what?
DEIA orders that had to do with
Like, let alone all the other issues here. And I think Sam's starting to realize, like, oh, okay, I see what I'm dealing with in this guy.
agencies that have nothing to do with the military.
Yes, they do. Yes, they absolutely do.
The FDA, they just
No response to that, huh?
revoked the ability of the Air Force to teach Air Force members about the Tuskegee Airmen.
Well,
Like,
we're not.
what are we talking about here?
Okay, well,
Honestly, like, they're rewriting history.
well, that's your perspective, right?
I mean, do you want to address the statement of fact? I mean, the rewriting history, I guess, could be said to be an interpretation of fact, but it's certainly quite close to the fact if you don't discount or if you don't argue against that statement of fact. And that is what the anti-DEI stuff is. Like, that's literally part of it, is like erasing. I talked about this on the podcast, on the Verbal Journal. Like, they're just deleting images and all sorts of terms and articles from all these different websites because the Republicans hate free speech. When you see people talk about how much they love something like free speech, sometimes they're lying and overcompensating because they actually don't like it at all. And on some level, they know that they don't like it. See the recent arrest, the ICE arrest and detainment of a pro-Palestine protester at Columbia University in the United States. This guy's a leader of the protest movement at Columbia. He's in on he was not born in the U.S. I believe he has a green card. I forget if he has a green card or a visa. At first they thought he had one and then realized he had the other. They have no idea what they're doing. All they know is they don't want him to be an effective voice in any sort of public movement, and they hate free speech. So sometimes it's just important. Usually when you're debating with a friend or family member, you're not dealing with issues or like the consequences are not as profound, of your a family member having like an opposing view, but it still is useful to identify when they might be just not self-aware and overcompensating by saying they think something that's the opposite. Often it is the diametric opposite. So anyways, yeah.
But at the end of the day, if a person
At the end of the day.
Tuskegee Airmen, we can all agree, existed, right?
Just listen to this. If you were racist, right, and you were an employer, and if you wanted to absolutely be racist and exercise that, you would. I think DEI sort of prevents people from seeing the reality. If a person truly wanted to hire you based on your intellect, based on your skill set, they would.
Okay, so we're just very confused. We're getting like a few different things, and it's confused. We're sort of coming back to the initial thing that was like, oh, are you racist? And like, if you're not racist, like, why do you think other people are? And like, why do we need policies if no one's racist? But here now we're getting like a different manifestation of the argument, which is, so you can sort of see some floundering, I think, a little bit. But that's a logical term, is floundering. But yeah, you can see we've kind of returned to that, but it's different now because now it's like, oh, isn't it maybe better for people to know when a boss is racist and not have to not know that they're racist? And that's like, that's a strange argument. I mean, like, I guess I see where you're coming from, but also it would be better for them to not be able to act on their racism long term, because other people will have to work there probably. People need jobs, you know what I mean?
DEI essentially provides tax cuts for the end of the year. When you create your tax returns, they give you a tax credit for hiring someone who is black or a person of color. I don't know if you knew that.
In these agencies?
In agencies and private
In government
businesses.
agencies, they don't get tax cuts for hiring people
And
of
the other
color.
thing I
This
wanted
So this is a great moment. I mean, this is a great moment. He tries to move on really fast. Like, I mean, he just does nothing to substantiate. Oh, really? So that was fun. We had a little interruption. Let me see. Hold on. So, okay, that was fun. I guess that's just one collective stream. We'll see if that stays together later, because I feel like I did create a new thing when I restreamed it, but maybe I didn't. Okay, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I would love to say that that was because I was talking about the pro-Palestine protester at Columbia and the Zionist Corporation took me out, but unfortunately, I don't actually think that was the case at all. It looks like it was a copyright thing, so I'm just being totally intellectually honest with you here and telling you that. Let's just get a little check-in with Tesla stock just for kind of a little pep after that. Okay. So normally it's not good to lose that much value in a day. Okay. Okay. So anyways, hey, and welcome back. And, let's follow up on this. I think this is an important moment.
is to protect people from discrimination.
The other thing I want to kind of state here is
The
that
other thing I want to kind of state here, after
I've
you've
realized
just
that a lot of-
after you've just pointed out that I didn't really know what I was talking about in regards to tax break, like, okay, because and again, you can't necessarily look up every single thing that's talked about in a debate, so sometimes you have to stipulate it and then see if it holds up, with that stipulation. So like here, it's like, if what he was saying was true and people got tax breaks for hiring minorities outside of the government or in the government, why would he move on from the point so quickly?
one of the times with the liberals is that you guys push for example, for DEI and people of Latino or Hispanic descent. And a lot of the times what you don't realize is you're actually doing more harm than good by putting them in positions where you make them believe that it's based on the color of their skin. It's based on
DEIA.
It's like, okay, like that's sort of related, but also like you don't need to explain that. You could try to just prove wrong the claim if you wanted to.
Is not.
it's based on merit. DEI emphasizes color, skin color, physical
it
attributes.
says that the people who work in your agency, it's about anti-discrimination.
Oh, I think I might just keep. Did I go unavailable again? Jesus Christ, dude. Wow. Okay, so I don't know if I'm back. I'm probably not. All right, so I don't know if I'm coming through. Let's see. I'm gonna see if I'm still coming